all together for the Research Foundation's next installment of RAVA. And today's topic is going to be what faculty should know about innovation. And I know this has been a very popular topic that comes up from time to time. So before we launch into the program, I'm going to pass it over to Kathleen from the central office.
Thank you, Carolyn, and welcome RAVA participants. This is our second to last program, and we are happy that you've joined us. We are replaying a Learning Tuesday session from a couple of years ago because we actually had all the same materials for this program around innovation and commercialization. So some of you may recognize it from a previous Learning Tuesday, and others it'll be new information. It's a really great program, so we hope you enjoy it. I do want to just mention that next month, August 19th, our session is entitled Addressing the Changing Funding Environment. We're working on that program right now. It will be the last time we're together as a RAVA cohort, so we'll have a little graduation surprise for everybody. And you will be getting an evaluation like Jamie typically sends out to get a sense from you of what you thought about the session, but also about the program in general. We're not sure what we're going to do going forward with this particular program. We may rebrand it into something we already currently have, or we may keep it exactly as it is. So we're really looking for your good feedback, and we'll send that around next month. So the only other thing is that every once in a while, Jamie and I will see a note from somebody asking that the materials get submitted, you know, the materials from these RAVA sessions. And so Jamie, do you want to just remind people where they're all posted?
So I know that people would love to have our presentations ahead of time. That sometimes that's just not possible. Presentations aren't always even provided to us ahead of time. However, I try very hard within a week of these sessions. All these recorded sessions are uploaded into the RF YouTube channel. So you should have gotten an email from me somewhere around June 24th. Check your spam if you didn't receive it. That lets you know that all of those recorded sessions are available, and I even link to those recordings. So if you have any problem accessing that, just email me directly, and I'll be sure to get you linked up with those. But you can always look back on them there and share them even from there.
Well, that's a good reminder, so thank you. Okay, Carolyn, I'll let you take over controls.
Sure, thank you. All right, so I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully everyone can see the screen here, but please let us know in the chat if you're having any issues. And again, this program is being recorded and will be posted for you to view on demand as well. So without further ado, and I know I'm going to be in part of this video too, so it'll be slightly painful for me to watch myself from years ago, but it is a very good program, and I have fond memories of doing this down at Stony Brook. So thank you.
Hello, and welcome to Learning Tuesday. I'm Jenna Lear, Learning and Development Manager at the Research Foundation for SUNY. Today, we are rebroadcasting one of our most popular Learning Tuesday episodes, What Faculty Should Know About Innovation, and it has become one of our most replayed Learning Tuesday episodes of all time, and it's still relevant today. With that in mind, I will pass you to my predecessor, Carolyn Matisky, who coordinated the original episode, to introduce the speakers and the program in further depth.
Good morning. Welcome to Learning Tuesday. I'm Carolyn Matisky, Learning and Development Manager at the Research Foundation Central Office. I'm proud to introduce today's program, What Faculty Should Know About Innovation. And this program is actually a part of the RF SUNY Center for Professional Development program that is just beginning, that empowers faculty with research leadership abilities. The moderator of today's program is SUNY Center for Professional Development Academic Programs Manager, Dr. Chris Price. And he is in our Viking Studios in Troy, New York. We'll get to him in just a moment, but I do want to introduce Dr. Lily Cushenberry, who is a professor here at Stony Brook University. She's an assistant professor in the management program and also director of leadership and creativity research lab. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We also have 2 faculty members at our Binghamton University joining us today. So we will go to their studio location a little bit later in today's program. We have Dr. Pamela Mission, faculty advisor to the president, associate professor in the Department of Public Administration. And we also have Dr. Kimberly Jousey, associate professor, organizational behavior and leadership in the School of Management. The panel will address as many of your questions as they can today, and I encourage you to ask them. So you can submit questions in 2 ways. You could either use the chat feature right through live stream, or you can email your questions to studioa@hvcc.edu. And that information will appear on the bottom of your screen periodically throughout the program. So please, as questions come to mind, chat them, and you can also interact with the full audience using the chat feature as well. So chat your questions, email your questions, and we will direct them to our presenters today. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris Price at Viking Studios to begin today's program. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'm sitting in your seat that you probably typically sit in for Learning Tuesdays, and hopefully I do a good job in your place today. So Carolyn did mention our Research Leadership Professional Development Program. There are 4 components to the program. Today we're going to talk about innovation, but we also will have programming around commercialization, publishing, and grant writing. If you go to the Center for Professional Development's website, you can find a list of other events, especially around grant writing. We have courses around grant writing. The purpose of the program is to help faculty and staff learn about research, the competencies that they need to be effective researchers. It's designed to support the SUNY strategic plan with regard to research. And it is applicable to all disciplines and all institution types, whether you're at a university center or at a community college. Hopefully the programs will be something that you find helpful and useful. Today we're going to learn a number of things from our esteemed panel of colleagues at Stony Brook and Binghamton. We're going to learn a little bit about innovation as a field of study, awareness of what's important to know about innovation, and then some misconceptions around innovation. We'll clear those up. We'll learn about how mistakes can be a driver of innovation, and then we'll learn about things going on at SUNY, specifically at Binghamton, around innovation in teaching and learning. And then finally, hopefully you'll be persuaded by the end of our session today that sharing resources will benefit all of us when it comes to research and innovation. All right, so that's all I have, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Stony Brook and Dr. Lily Cushenberry.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be talking a little bit about research and innovation and some of the best practices that we know from the research to help you be a little bit more innovative in your faculty position. I'm Dr. Lily Cushenberry. I am an assistant professor of management in the College of Business at Stony Brook University, and I also direct the Leadership and Creativity Research Lab. So I guess Chris is going to be helping me advance the slides. You'll be hearing me say next a few times. That's part of the innovativeness here we're trying to bring to you. So we'll start with the first slide. So today I'll be talking a little bit about the definition of creativity and innovation. Sometimes people don't quite know what it means to be innovative. We'll talk a bit about what we know about the creative individual, and you might recognize a few of those things in yourselves. We'll discuss the barriers for innovation, which is especially important for faculty who are leading new research frontiers and coming up with new research ideas and as well as practices in the classroom. And then we'll also discuss from the research what are some of the best practices that you can use. Next. So we'll begin with what is creativity. So when we define creativity, it's really about generating ideas and solutions that are both novel and useful. So for example, I could say, hey everyone, let's all sit on the tables today instead of the chairs, right? So that would be something new. We haven't done that before. But what purpose would that serve? We wouldn't actually call that creative because it doesn't have that serving of a purpose that's necessary for us to define it as creativity. So in order for something to be considered creative, it has to be new, something that causes us some surprise, but it also needs to be something that serves a purpose or something that's useful to us in some way. Next. Now, in order for us to use those creative ideas, we need to implement them. So we might create the new product or the process and actually make that idea come to life. And in that case, we would then call that innovation. Now, innovation can be both a product and a process, and often one will result in more innovation in the other. So, for example, we have the assembly line from Henry Ford that helped us produce more cars, and then when those cars came to mass market, those ended up helping to refine the assembly line process. So when we think of innovation, it's not necessarily just a thing that we're creating. And for many of us in research and in teaching, often we innovate on the processes, making them more efficient and making us, allowing us to be even more creative with the products that we then produce. Now, this brings us to trying to understand who would be more creative. Now, for research teams, we want to kind of pick out those students or those research assistants or other faculty that we want to work with to try to understand how we can create this really great creative team. And so we might want to look for some of the things that help somebody be more creative. So who's more likely to be innovative? Now, this is all from the research. So if you think about people that you've known that are creative, would you consider the expert or the novice to be more creative? And what we find from the research is it's really the expert. So there's two general types of expertise. There's domain-specific and kind of a more broad expertise, and both are really important for innovative performance. So sometimes people think that the new person that sort of comes on the scene is going to have all these really great ideas, but in reality what we find is that it takes a lot of knowledge to understand where the problems are in the field, and therefore the expertise is really useful to help us come up with ideas that are not only new, but also useful as part of that definition for creativity. Also, sometimes people wonder if being really intelligent might limit us in coming up with new and creative ideas. But what we actually find is that intelligence is a big predictor of innovation. So part of innovation is solving problems, and intelligence allows us to do that. It helps us kind of consider how to best combine information and how to really see what the best way to solve a problem is. Also, a big part of innovation is motivation. So we know from much of our research that motivation is really important for solving problems. And so managers often ask, what is the best way to motivate a creative individual? And what we find is that the intrinsically motivated person tends to be the one that can really overcome a lot of those failures. And sometimes when managers make too many extrinsic motivation types of programs, so in other words, they give too many rewards like money or promotions, etc., that can actually demotivate intrinsically motivated individuals that are creative. And then finally, we ask, what kind of personality is involved in being an innovative person? Now, this is the part where you might think about yourself and how you interact with people. But what we find from the research is actually a little bit of a mix. So, for example, some research actually suggests that innovators have this really direct or even kind of forceful personality profile, that they tend to be somewhat aggressive and dominant, and there may be people that you wouldn't want to hang out with for long periods of time. So perhaps the very famous example of this is Steve Jobs, who's very well known for yelling at his subordinates and having really high standards for his work. Much of this can actually end up causing him to act in these really aggressive ways. But even scientists aren't immune. So Thomas Edison, for example, whenever he was trying to persuade people to use his form of power rather than other sources of power, he actually famously started electrocuting animals in the street. So people with these big ideas tend to really believe in them, and sometimes that can cause them to act in ways that aren't always socially acceptable to others. So this actually was the impetus for one of my own research studies along with Dr. Sam Hunter at Penn State. And we were curious about whether jerks really are more creative. So again, the research suggests, and this is from a meta-analysis, that creative individuals tend to have a lot of these sort of negative traits like arrogance, hostility, very high self-confidence, a need for autonomy, low levels of agreeableness, or what we call being a jerk, or willingness to upset norms to be heard, low levels of communality, and just generally it's a person who doesn't really care about making a good impression. Now, many of these traits are really necessary when you think about how much it takes to get an idea through and to convince other people that an idea is really important. You're going to have to face a lot of barriers. And if you're someone who's really sensitive to the opinions of others, it's going to be hard for you to do that. But we were kind of sitting around and thinking, well, we've met a lot of creative people who actually are really nice. So surely there's, surely that's not something that you have to have in order to be creative and innovative. So we had this theory that perhaps agreeable people might have really good ideas, but they're just a little bit less likely to voice them because they're nice people. They care about the opinions of others, and so maybe they're thinking all these really great thoughts, but they're just worried that they're going to be judged by the people around them. So our recent studies actually showed that jerks might be more likely to get their ideas heard, but they don't necessarily have more original ideas. So we put people in groups. We asked them to develop an idea on their own and write it down, and then we had them come together in groups, and we could actually see the extent to which those individual ideas transferred to the group idea. So we found that the nice people did have just as good of ideas as the less nice people, or what we call people low on agreeableness. But when it came to that group transfer variable to see who actually got their ideas in the final products, it tended to be the less agreeable people who were probably more assertive with their ideas, and those are the ones that got their ideas heard. But what we also found in another study, as a follow-up study, is that if the group was nicer, so if we had kind of a more agreeable group, then the agreeable people were just as likely to have their ideas used. So that means that the environment actually matters quite a bit for creativity. So speaking of environment, many of the barriers to innovation actually come from the environment. And as leaders for innovation, or as managers of research labs and classrooms, these are really important for us to understand in order to prevent them. So one of the things that we know, and this is actually kind of sad, is that people tend to be biased against original ideas, and they prefer safe or low-risk ideas instead. Now, we see this when we have a new product come out, and it's basically the same as the old product, but just slightly different. We call that incremental innovation. And people tend to be a lot more comfortable with incremental innovation than what we call radical innovation. So if an idea is really new, that makes people a little bit nervous. So that means that convincing other people to accept a creative idea is pretty hard. And you have to have an individual that's really willing to persuade other people of their ideas, even if there is a negative outcome. Negative outcomes in the work environment include things like evaluation apprehension, so people who are really concerned about what their boss is going to think about them, if they're concerned about whether or not they'll get promoted or get accepted by their group. Nobody wants to be that weird person at work that's yelling out ideas that no one agrees with. And so that tends to prevent innovation from happening, especially when people are generating ideas in groups. And because of this evaluation apprehension, sometimes people feel like it's not really worth it to propose a new idea, and it's actually easier to sort of go the safe route. So rather than proposing something new and risky and being judged by the people around them, often when we get together in groups, we all just discuss the things that we all kind of know and agree on, rather than the things that are unique to each of us and the expertise that we all bring to the group. Another concern for employees is that they worry that other people will steal their ideas. So in my own research and my consulting experience, one of the things that people often express is that they might say a new idea in their environment, in the work environment, but they, not only does that idea not necessarily go anywhere, but maybe somebody else will take credit. And that's really frustrating for someone who really believes in their idea and somebody who cares a lot about getting that idea implemented. Or again, maybe they say that idea, and often people have this experience that nothing really happens to it, that it kind of grinds to a halt, and they don't necessarily get the support that they need from their organization in order to see that idea through. And if you have several experiences like that in a row, it can be frustrating to continue to try to be innovative despite all of those risks and barriers. And we see that people kind of develop this learned helplessness to proposing new ideas. All right, so this kind of brings us to some of the research on what you can do in order to prevent these barriers and to really create the environment that is necessary in order for people to be creative. Now, one of the things that we know is that creativity, although there are some personality differences and we can assess general creative ability, that it tends to stretch like a rubber band. So similar to intelligence, we are born with a set point of creativity, but we can stretch like a rubber band to the environment that we're in. So if we're in a very supportive environment, we can be more creative. If we're in an unsupportive environment, that will probably encourage us to be less creative. And genetic studies actually suggest that genes determine only 10% of the variability in creative potential. So really there is a lot of room for development, and it really goes to show that the environment matters a lot, and we know that leaders and managers are the people that shape that environment. So one of the things that you can do as a leader is develop what we call a psychologically safe environment. So psychological safety is allows us to feel like we can express ideas without other people kind of judging us or making us feel bad for those ideas. And this doesn't mean that, you have to say everyone's idea is great, because we know that that's not really true, right? And we've all had this experience where we're in a group and somebody comes up with this sort of terrible idea. But what you need to be careful of is the way that you approach that person's idea, because if you shoot that one down, what that signals to everybody else is that when we, say something, that we're going to get judged for it. So instead of sort of critiquing that person, or even those microfacial expressions that we often don't even realize that we're doing, you have to consider what's good about that idea, what's useful about that idea, and perhaps other people in the team can build off of that, and that might end up being the next great thing. Now, another thing that leaders really need to do is share their vision. So figure out what it is that you're working towards, set that as a goal for your team, and be really passionate about that. That'll rub off on the rest of your team. And it's so important when creative work can be so difficult. It's estimated that only something like 1 in 20 creative ideas will succeed. So there's really a lot of failure involved in innovation. So having that passionate motivation, having a leader that's really confident about the future and kind of sharing this vision of what they see is going to be the innovation that's going to solve all these problems, that's really important. In addition to that, people are really motivated by having meaning in their work. So if you can really explain why you're working on the problem that you're working on, that's very motivating to your team as well. In addition to that, as a leader, the behavior that you do is going to influence how other people act. So if you role model openness, if you're really interested in a variety of disciplines and getting content knowledge from all sorts of other areas and being just generally intellectually curious, this is going to influence the rest of your team to be the same way. So you want to be open to a variety of solutions rather than in search of that just one correct solution, because typically innovation isn't going to be that first idea that you get. It might come a little bit later, particularly as you build that expertise in the problem that you're trying to solve. So an example of this is just a really simple thing that you can start doing in your own teams, is rather than saying, what should we do, you might want to change your language to say, what could we do? So for example, this study suggested that can lead to a higher number of quality creative answers. So just by shifting the way that you talk and thinking about all of the possibilities rather than searching for that one single answer, you can really improve the creativity in your team. And one more thing, I personally study leader mistakes and what happens when leaders make mistakes, how they recover from them. And we see that this is really important in innovation as well. So because of that rate of failure that's so high, it's almost important for you to know that you're going to fail and that things aren't going to work out. No, we know this is really true in research. We know this is true in teaching as well. And as faculty, we fail all the time. We try to cover it up a little bit. But you might want to consider talking about some of your mistakes and building that environment where people feel free to fail and people feel free to experiment a little bit. That can really improve that psychological safety in your team and allow people to take more risks in the things that they're doing. So just to summarize a little bit, we know innovation is this really complex process. It produces something that's both novel and useful. So again, it's not enough for something just to be different or new, but it needs to solve a problem. It needs to be useful in some way. Well, I also talked a little bit about how creative people have these personalities that allow them to overcome people's general resistance to change. So because people don't like radical innovation, people kind of are more comfortable with things the way they are, it sort of takes a little bit of pushiness in order to get that idea through. And you're going to have to get used to people kind of not being sure about your idea, being okay with that, and not feeling so judged that you aren't able to continue with your ideas. And then finally, for leaders, it's really important to facilitate that creative product, that positive creative climate in order to increase innovation. So be really mindful of the way that you're reacting to people's comments and the way that you're responding to others in your team, because that actually can build a positive creative climate or a negative creative climate depending on the behaviors that you're doing as a manager. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to my research lab, some of the most innovative people that I know here at Stony Brook University. And if you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to contact me, you can visit my website, www.thelclab.com, and feel free to email me if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Lily. I'm just going to come into the shot here. And before we turn it back over to our next speaker, I did want to just ask you a question. That was a great presentation, and I can see why your students are so happy to have you as a professor. You do a really great job in getting people excited about how creative they can be and create environments for people to be creative. So my question is about time. So everyone has a different sense of time. Mm-hmm. Some people feel very pressured. And I'm just wondering if there's any relationship that you've seen about time, and faculty especially feel like they're under a lot of time constraints. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that your research shows about time, or things that we could do to just be aware that time is an issue for some people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say one thing that would be related to that I'm sure lots of faculty could relate to is procrastination. So part of being innovative is coming up with these new ideas, and sometimes that can take a lot of time, as you said. We all have a lot of pressure in the various activities that we're working on. Some of the research suggests that if you give someone a problem and they solve it right away, that solution actually tends to be not as good as if they kind of had some time in between. Okay. So if you feel like you're procrastinating on your teaching or your research, you may not realize that you're actually still kind of iterating on that idea in your mind, and that can be really good for the quality of the final solution.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you and I can apply it to my own work, I like to have at least one quiet day where I don't schedule a lot of meetings. And if there is something that I want to be creative with, something that is writing or putting together a presentation, that I have some quiet time. Mm-hmm. Is that helpful to people to do to be creative?
Yeah,
I can't see myself being creative when I have back-to-back meetings, and it just seems a lot more impossible.
Yeah, you do need time to think about those ideas, and having that one quiet day can be really useful. But also, you can't put things off to the last minute either. So the relationship is curvilinear with procrastination. In other words, a little bit of extra time is useful, but if you wait all the way till the deadline, then people's ideas get a lot less creative. So you want to build in a little bit of time and give yourself time to think about it, but you also want to make sure that you're still getting it done. And some of the research on teams actually suggests that if you have just one person who's really time urgent on your team, that can drive your whole team to start working on your task faster. So if you're somebody that procrastinates a lot, you might want to partner with somebody else who's very time urgent, and then the balance between those would probably work out to your benefit.
That's a great tip. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I think we should pass it over to Binghamton, where Dr. Pamela Mission is going to do a presentation on Sustainable Community Area of Excellence.
Hi, can you hear me? I don't know.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so hi, my name is Pam Mission, and I am an associate professor in public administration, and I chair our Sustainable Communities Transdisciplinary Area of Excellence. So if we can go to the first slide. I'll tell you a little bit about how we came up with the idea of the TAEs, as we call them, the Transdisciplinary Areas of Excellence. In our SUNY 2020 plan, we plan to hire 150 net new faculty members over a 5-year period. And so as a university, we had to make a decision about, well, how were we going to make those hires? Are we going to do them across the board? Does everybody get some, what's going to be the strategy for this? And we wanted to make them strategically in areas of research. And cluster hiring is not something that Binghamton University has invented. It's going on in a number of different universities. And we had 2 that were ongoing, and those were around the areas of smart energy and health sciences. But those really didn't represent the university as a whole. Most of our liberal arts school were not represented in those, and several of our professional schools as well. So the provost brought together a strategic planning team around the idea of creating transdisciplinary areas of excellence. And over a year, they discussed the various strengths of the faculty here at Binghamton University and added 3 additional TAEs. And those are citizenship, rights, and cultural belonging, material and visual worlds, and sustainable communities. And that's the one I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. Tying in what Lily was talking about, these TAEs were created by the provost's office and just kind of told, do something, right? Go out and create. We knew that we were going to be able to hire faculty within these areas, but beyond that, we were given small budgets and just told, to try to encourage research in these areas. And so we really were all given this kind of space for innovation. And each of the 5 TAEs did it in a different way. So what I'm going to talk about is just how we approached it. And it would look different if you had any of the other 4 TAE chairs here talking with you. All right, so next slide. So before we go on to kind of the strategies, I thought I should define some of the terms so that you know what I was talking about. The first thing that we struggled with was, what does transdisciplinary mean anyway? And the way we have defined it is to think about it in terms of the different types of research that we can do. We can do research within our disciplines, so that would be disciplinary research. I'm in the field of public administration. If I publish in just a public administration journal and I'm doing work strictly from a public administration perspective, that would be disciplinary research. We could also work in multidisciplinary teams. So if I join together with somebody in geology and somebody in political science and somebody in geography, and we all decided to start studying the local implications for sustainable communities of hydraulic fracturing, which we actually did, then that we formed a multidisciplinary team. And so we all approached that research from our own disciplinary perspectives, but we didn't really try to merge them in any meaningful way. When you do that, when you try to take research from different areas and come up with something that merges those, that would be considered interdisciplinary research. So some of the research that I do involves complex adaptive systems theory. That's very interdisciplinary. It's a body of theory that has emerged from people working in system science and mathematics and physics and biology, and it becomes an interdisciplinary field. Transdisciplinary then is the umbrella that goes over all of these. And we really like the idea of doing having these be transdisciplinary areas of research because there are times when you want to tackle a particular problem from a particular discipline. You really want to delve deeply into what that discipline offers that topic. There are times when multidisciplinary research makes sense, and there's also times when interdisciplinary research makes sense. So we wanted to make sure that we created a structure that allowed for all of these types of research to happen, and we were to be inclusive and not exclusive about who was doing sustainable communities research. Okay, next slide. So what is sustainable communities? So sustainable communities was very carefully chosen as opposed to just sustainability, because what we realized is that where we really excelled was looking at issues of sustainability at the community level. And sustainability is often conflated with just issues around the environment. And at the community level, we really are concerned with the environment, the economy, and issues of social equity. And a sustainable community is one in which all three of those things are balanced. So that is our focus, kind of looking at those intersections. And so the intersection of those three things is really where the interdisciplinary happens. But you can see that if you were studying just the environmental impact of a particular technology, then you would still be part of our transdisciplinary area of excellence, even if your research wasn't necessarily touching on the economy or on social equity. Or if people that were looking at the environment and the economy and social equity separately started working together, they could form multidisciplinary teams. Next slide. So the sustainable communities transdisciplinary of excellence, what is that exactly? There are different ways of looking at that. One, we have a steering committee, and this is a committee of 13 faculty who represent all of the schools and colleges within Binghamton University. And that is the governing board, so to speak, for what it is that we do. So sets the goals and the objectives and the direction and creates strategies for creating this transdisciplinary area of excellence. But it's really not the committee itself. The TAE isn't the committee. That's just the group of people who volunteer an hour a week during the semester to kind of keep this whole thing moving forward. It really is the 67 affiliated faculty with, and so this is, and we let anybody who says, hey, I do research in this area, affiliate with us. We're trying to be inclusive, not exclusive. And we don't just focus on research, although that was the reason that we created the TAEs, was to incentivize more research in these areas. We felt that because of the very applied nature of sustainable communities, that we needed to be focusing on research, education, and practice goals. So one of the things that we did as a steering committee this year was to create a strategic plan. We worked for 2 years as a group and got a feel for what it was that we were really doing here. Hired a lot of faculty as affiliated faculty. And then we thought, it's really time to say, to put some goals down on paper and say, this is what we're really trying to achieve. And we came up with research, education, and practice level goals. And I'll talk about each of those individually now. So research and the TAE. Our primary strategy for encouraging more research was to allow existing faculty to affiliate, but then also, as I stated in the first slide, why did we create these TAs in the first place? It was to be able to direct our hiring. So we had core and affiliated hires associated with each of the TAEs. The affiliated hires were the majority of these hires, and those are people who are coming in at the junior level. Those searches were really being done by departments. And so a department would propose that they would hire a particular person who would be a good fit for the TAE, but would also meet their departmental needs. And we as a TAE would participate in that search and really say, oh yeah, this person's a good fit, or this person really isn't a good fit. But the person was ultimately going to be placed within the department. So it was really something that had to be negotiated between the TAE and the departments. The core hires, on the other hand, were directed at senior level faculty. We recognized that we really needed to bring in some superstars, people who we could build research around, who could help anchor research in particular areas, and could also serve as mentors for existing faculty and our new affiliated hires. So the core hires were done as searches run by the TAE steering committee itself. And it was an interesting process. We decided that we would hire a core faculty member to direct our environmental studies program. So environmental studies here at Binghamton University is an interdisciplinary program. It doesn't have, with the exception of one person, have any faculty that are environmental studies alone. They are faculty who are in other departments and offer courses in environmental studies. But we felt that this program really needed a new director. And so we set out to search for a senior level person to come in. Now this person could have been from a number of disciplines. And in fact, we got applications from sociology and anthropology and geography and public administration and a number of different fields. So the way we managed this was that we selected what we thought were the top candidates and then brought the departments that we thought would ultimately host this faculty member into the process and said, hey, would this person work for you as well? So through that process, we were able to hire 2 core faculty. One ended up being placed. The person who we hired and ended up directing the environmental studies program, which is technically, because of our own bureaucratic structure within Binghamton University, has aligned somewhat in geology. That's where the program is housed, even though it's an interdisciplinary program. The faculty member is actually an archaeologist in our anthropology department. We also hired a second person in that same process who was doing really great research in hazards and would have has added greatly to our geography department. So we ended up getting 2 core hires out of that same search. So the second thing that we're doing in order to encourage more research is we create what are called seed grants. And these are funded from the small pool of money that we get every year from the provost's office. And we solicit research proposals from Binghamton University faculty who are working in multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary teams. And these are usually around $10,000, and we've given out about 6 of those so far. The purpose of these is to get people working together who haven't worked together before, so that they have a track record and then are able to go out for larger external grants. And so that is working at this point. I mean, there are grant applications that are now out that weren't out before. Our third strategy is the development of new organized research centers and affiliation with existing ones. So there are 3 research centers that we currently have that have chosen to affiliate with our Sustainable Communities TAE. One is COCO, which is a Center for Collective Dynamics of Complex Systems, the Center for Integrated Watershed Studies, and EVOS, our Evolutionary Studies Institute. And so again, trying to create this critical mass of people who are studying these issues of sustainable communities. How can we get people working together, creating those agreeable teams of people who can support one another in this innovation? We also host conferences and brown bags, again, to get people together, introduce them to people they wouldn't know. And we created, and I can't take credit for this particular innovation. This was actually done by a different TAE, the Citizenship Rights and Cultural Belonging TAE. But we mimicked them, and they did a speed dating for researchers event, where we invited anybody who was interested in doing research in sustainable communities to come to an event. We gave them 2 minutes in various pairings, and then they rotated around the room and got to talk to each other for 2 minutes each about the research that they were doing, hopefully to find research partners that they may not have even considered before, because they didn't really know that sustainable community research and philosophy, I didn't realize that. Oh, you can do sustainable communities research in School of Management, so can I. So as I said, research was really the reason that we brought these TAEs together, but sustainable communities is such a practical research area that it doesn't make sense to talk about sustainable communities without talking about the actual creation of sustainable communities in the real world. So for us to be successful as researchers, we need to see that research be turned into practice. And one way to do that is the creation of educational programs. So when it comes to education and the TAE, you can go to the next slide now. We created a new master's degree in sustainable communities that will enroll for, we are currently enrolling students for fall of 2016. And one of the reasons that we even came up with this sustainable communities TAE concept was that we already had faculty who were working together to create this new degree program before the TAEs were envisioned here at the university. So it made sense that we already had the Department of Geography and Public Administration were trying to create this new degree that we could build on that and create a TAE around the idea of sustainable communities. We also have the undergraduate interdisciplinary program that I've already mentioned, a BA and a BS in environmental studies. We have a sustainable engineering minor, and we have a sustainable community specialization within our Master of Public Administration program. So creating these educational programs will help us educate the next generation of sustainable communities practitioners who will take the research out into communities and also will be research assistants and will assist us with the research that we're doing as faculty members. All right, so then finally, next slide, we talked about the importance of practice and the TAE. That if we want to become the internationally known university for sustainable communities, then well, we better actually be living in a sustainable community, right? And what is our community? It's Binghamton University itself and the surrounding area. So we decided that making Binghamton and the greater Binghamton area and Binghamton University more sustainable should be part of our goal as well. So we have a couple of different ways that this practice is interacting with education and research. One is that one of our TAEC grants is an ongoing engagement research project in the Binghamton community. So we are doing engaged research that will ultimately make Binghamton as a community more sustainable. But then we also are interested in, how are we doing as a university? And there are several ranking systems that exist for ranking universities when it comes to sustainability. They largely go through ASHE STARS, which stands for, oh, I forgot to write this one down. It's Schools of Higher Sustainability and Higher Education is what SHE stands for. I'm going to say American Association for Schools of Sustainability and Higher Education. And it's a mechanism by which universities can submit data about their university and about the sustainability initiatives underway. And ranking systems like Princeton Review and the Sierra Club's Cool Schools pull from ASHE to create their ranking systems. So what we did this year is we thought, well, we need a good baseline. We need to know what it is that where do we rank currently? How well are we doing when it comes to sustainability issues? So we just went through a year of data collection and trying to basically, find out what is it that we are doing. And in the process of completing these ranking systems, we learned about the university. We learned that we were doing things that we didn't even know that we had, that those of us on the steering committee didn't even know that we were doing. Okay, finally then, last slide. I'm going to give you an example of one particular project that brings research, education, and practice together. And this is a new initiative we have here at Binghamton University. We are creating a living building at Nuthatch Hollow. So Nuthatch Hollow is part of our nature preserve. And a living building is a net positive energy, water, and waste building that is certified by the Living Futures Institute. There are currently only 8 certified buildings in the world, and we hope to be one of them. There are many, many projects underway, but only 8 currently certified. So our current status is that we're in planning for this. We hope to break ground in spring of 2018, occupy it in 2019, and you have to actually occupy the building and show that it works the way it was planned for a year before certification is possible. And this has research, education, and practice components. The research component is also in conjunction with our Smart Energy TAE. They are interested in residential scale energy systems. And so this will be, because our living building will be about the size of a typical house, about 2,000 square feet. It's a perfect location for doing research about energy generation and energy storage and energy use. So it is going to be the building itself is going to be part of a research study, as well as how the building integrates into the larger nature preserve. Part of the building is going to be dedicated to research. There will be labs on the first floor, so people who are doing research in the nature preserve have a site for conducting that research. The other part of the building will be used for education, to house our environmental studies program, classes, and outreach programs in the summer for the general community. So that it also incorporates this practice component, a practice component not just for the university to think about how can we as a university become more sustainable, but to engage the community around issues of sustainable communities as well. I think that's all I have to say. If you have any questions and you think of them after today's presentation, feel free to email me. My email address is on the screen.
I would just like to add, this is Kim speaking, I would just like to add to Pam's presentation that the faculty hiring process for these TAEs is really such an incredible process to go through. It's been a great way for us to actually get very high quality faculty who are interested in doing interdisciplinary research. And so it's become a unique value proposition for us in order for recruiting very high quality research talent. So it's innovative on many, 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 in many directions, by many sides. I'm picturing like a hexa, some sort of sided object with many, 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 many sides that continues to have very positive spillovers for the community here within Binghamton that I think is definitely really fantastic architecture for innovation. Okay, so Chris, do we do questions for Pam or should?
Hi, yeah, well, I mean, I think we don't have any in the chat right now, but I have a ton, and actually you just kind of hit on the last one, and it relates to the challenge of having faculty from various disciplines serve on search committees for positions like this. And I know that faculty just think, they're trained in a discipline, and to sort of come together and make such an important decision together with others from other disciplines. You spoke about the great things that came about with that, but I wonder if you could speak to the challenges as well.
We've been really fortunate. All of our affiliated and core hire searches went really well. So the way the affiliated searches went was that the department would rank their candidates and the TAE would rank their candidates. And luckily we, and this is great. Nobody would have thought, I think this was going to happen from the beginning, but we ended up ranking them the same way. So even people outside the discipline were able to look at candidates and say, you know what, these just seem to be the stronger candidates, and we would rank them in the same order that the department. So we originally thought there could be conflicts in this process, but we haven't experienced any.
And I think one structural mechanism that helps with that is the TAE person would be in the job talk of the discipline, right? So we bring a person in the discipline of strategy, for example. We were trying to hire somebody, and the TAE member was not from the business school at all, and yet could tell from the way in which that person handled the questions, and even, you know, from the integration of their own research, whether or not they really were meant to be part of this, or they were just, you know, they didn't really understand it. It was very obvious because of the way having just that presence in the job talks changed the texture of the questions and of the candidates, and it made it super simple for all of us to see this person either can get it and go there and be interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or they just can't. And so I think that really helped, having them come to the job talks.
And you're speaking of one of the first, actually the first hire
was
that
he the
we
first
did.
one?
He was the first. And what we've learned also since then was that the earlier that the TAE folks can be involved in the process, the better. So, so before you even start putting people on your short list, it's pretty easy to find, you know, figure out, is this person going to be a good fit or not for the TAE? And so to avoid problems down the road where you bring somebody in who is just really not appropriate for the TAE, you kind of have, you're being able to do some of that sorting earlier was very valuable. When it came to the core hire, you know, we were really hiring somebody in an interdisciplinary area. And again, it's something that went relatively smoothly. There was a lot of coordination that had to happen because each of the final candidates we brought in would have been housed in a different department. And so really coordinating with each of those departments and making sure that that what we thought would be a good core hire was also going to be somebody who would be welcomed in the department that we would ask to host. I mean, that was really critical. And again, we were fortunate that the two people we thought were really our top candidates were I believe, unanimously embraced by the departments. Each of the departments voted, and they decided, yes, these are people that we would really like to have in our departments as well. So we haven't experienced a lot of challenges.
I think there's
in terms of our TAE.
I think it's like Lily's research, though, right? In terms of personality characteristics that would attract those kinds of people, they obviously, because of the interdisciplinary nature and those hour-a-week meetings with people all across campus, have to be the kind of people that would be high on agreeableness, be very open to experience, and find it interesting and fascinating to be talking with someone from a completely different discipline. So there's kind of a self-selection, right? Bias that works, I think, very much in our favor from the way in which it was structured on down to the actual hiring processes.
So I have one more question before we turn it over to Kim. And so I can tell that Binghamton University has a strategic priority to become, as you said, be the leading place for research about sustainable communities. And I'm sure that is sort of the center which your TAE kind of rotates around and gravitates towards, and my guess is that that's what keeps the momentum going for your TAE as well. So my question is, and this may be an unfair question because I'm asking you to speculate, but for those faculty who are on campuses where there isn't any sort of incentive in the strategic plan of the college or the university to do this type of research and teach these types of courses, do you see any ways or faculty could maybe from the grassroots kind of get together with colleagues on their campus and do this kind of work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's, this was started as a top-down initiative, create a TAE, right? But the way it came about was that faculty identified this as an area of strength. It has been supported by the administration, but it's really the interest of the faculty themselves working together that's going to keep it going. If the administration, and I don't want to say this too loudly, but if the administration just kind of pulled back their support, right, and said, we're not going to support you anymore, there's enough of a desire to move forward with this from the faculty perspective that at least for sustainable communities, we'd still be moving forward. We would be able to do fewer things because we wouldn't necessarily have the budget for it, but there's still a lot that we could do in terms of bringing the people together, creating that space for dialogue and for innovation is something that doesn't necessarily need administrative support to do that. So I think if enough faculty got together around a particular area and said, hey, listen, we really want to be known for this. And it doesn't even have to be just in research. It can be around education. It can be around practice or some kind of combination of those things. I think that can be a bottom-up process as well as a top-down process. And maybe even a bottom-up process that got enough interest from administration could then garner the support that it wanted to move forward.
I know for us, even with the complex systems, we had doctoral students taking courses over there with some of the faculty members in engineering and systems engineering and bioengineering before the TAEs started. And I think that really generated some research projects between, faculty, and then that, kind of naturally kept going as COCO evolved. Yes. So I definitely think I agree with you. Mm-hmm.
Now, Kim, we're going to start with your piece. I'll advance the slide now.
If we can have the first slide, please, that would be fantastic. Hello, everybody. I love that I'm going last because I have the task of bringing everything together. Pam's wonderful example of exactly how we structured the university to create innovation, and Lily's wonderful recap of the literature, which is also my space for doing research as well. So I get the big messy part, which I love. I'm one of those creative people that loves those big messes. So I call this, thinking about creating and innovating in all levels of analysis and levels of the hierarchy in our organizations, as well as all places, meaning physical places, departments, things like that, and in all spaces. Where can you find space to actually create these kinds of things? I'm going to tell you a story about another innovation that we have happening here. Next slide, please. That really helps exemplify what we call the organization being designed for innovation. So Lily did a wonderful job of covering how individuals are more predisposed to personality traits for creativity and innovation, jerks, not jerks, agreeableness, those kinds of things. And then also how leaders can facilitate a positive climate for innovation. And I'm going to add on to that second piece and really talk about what Pam exemplified, and that is how we can be architects for innovation and design our organizations from what we call an organizational design perspective for innovation. And so typically we talk about, these are several of the things we talk about when we think about organizational design, and we talk about systems and structure. So Pam described a very specific new organizational structure that's been added to Binghamton, and Lily talked about the people, so that's covered, and the personality traits that would or would not succeed in examples such as the TAEs. There also can be rituals and stories and things that can happen, and it all has to align with the strategy. So we are very lucky that we are at a time with a new president. Well, I guess he's not as new right now, but right, who's very innovation-based and gave us the opportunity and the resources to try new things, such as the structure. And we even talked about how to start, next slide please, how to start innovating in other ways. So in addition to the TAE structure, we went through a process when our new president, Harvey Stenger, came in called the roadmap process. And it was very bottom up in terms of faculty members being grouped together by topics, like how can we make students more successful? How can we increase research activity? How can we increase diversity and inclusiveness? And so these large groups, committees of 80, if you can imagine, in a room getting work done, came up with different buckets that we would reuse to focus on our journey to becoming a premier public university. So it's called the roadmap. It's online. There's a very specific guide in terms of the steps that we're to follow. And two of the ones that really caught my eye and were committees that I was involved with were every student having a high quality in learning intensive experience, which could be very service learning based or research based. And I thought, fantastic. How great would it be if we could commit to every undergraduate having a research experience by the time he or she leaves Binghamton? We also talked about, as a way to increase student success, meeting the students more where they are. bringing more things into our residential living communities that we call residential colleges here. Things like bringing the tutoring to the residential colleges, things like bringing classrooms to the residential colleges, things like adding academic advising into the residential colleges so that we could meet the students where they were rather than sitting in our offices waiting for them to come to us. So with those two things in mind, next slide, we decided, this is a new residential community we have here on campus called the Dickinson Community. It's beautiful, and they needed a new, what at the time was called a faculty master, we're now called collegiate professors, and they approached me about would I like to consider doing that. So our structure is modeled after the Oxford model, where there is a faculty person as well as an administrative person for each community. And the faculty advisor there becomes the collegiate professor, and they handle all things academic for the students. So they are the academic connection for the students to bring the learning to the living community. Luckily, in that role, you don't have to worry about lost keys or bad roommates. That's for the administrative person to deal with. So I am now the collegiate professor in Dickinson Community. Back to the previous slide, please, with Dickinson. And so in thinking about these two objectives that we had from the roadmap, next slide, please. When I took the job, I thought, in this, how could we build this? And what this is a research community inside a living community. So I actually got the seed planted from Lily and her research team at Stony Brook, and I thought, we don't have research happening in the living communities. We had all those other things that we talked about during the roadmap discussion. They had been added in. We have tutoring now inside the communities. We have classrooms held, classes held in the communities, but we weren't having any research happening in the actual living community. So I thought, what if I became the first research collegiate professor? And while that's not an official title, it's kind of what I consider myself. And I brought my research into the community. So to the right, you can actually see it in the background of that picture of the big room there. That's my research lab space. My office is right behind where the picture was taken, so I just walk back and forth across that big room. And to the right, the picture to the right is one of our teams working. So at orientation, when I felt it out with freshmen, I had no idea how many people we were going to get that would be interested in doing research. I agreed that we would take anybody. It was not going to be like an honors-based program. It would be a program that anyone who wanted to learn anything about research could come and work on my research. I had plenty of data to be, analyzed, and plenty of graduate assistants to help lead these teams. And so at orientation, I passed out the good old-fashioned piece of paper and asked how many students were interested, and I got over 100 freshmen who said they wanted to conduct research with me. And I had the wonderful problem of calling an opportunity or calling it a problem. I called it an opportunity, and we held a first meeting, and luckily enough, it was after the students had started their courses and they realized they were super busy, and we were down to 40, between 40 and 50 at the first part. Next slide, please. And they came together and created what we call DIRT, which is the Dickinson Research Team. So it's very student-centered. The students decided to call themselves DIRT, little I, that they were in a spot where they were going to grow as researchers, as students, as adults, as anything they wanted to grow in. It would happen through DIRT. While our core mission is to do research, they decided our core mission was to dig deeper. And whether that was into knowledge or into themselves or into research processes, or whether into organizational changes that were happening here on campus, they wanted to be a part of all of it. And so we became DIRT. That's our logo. We dig deeper. And the little paw prints indicate the bulk of the research that we do, primarily in the areas of creativity, of leadership, of innovation, and of diversity. So we have these 40 students, and they ebb and flow depending on what else happens in their life. One student got too busy driving the university bus and had to drop out, and just then another student came in and actually moved into our community just so they could be a member of our research team. So we have had a wonderful year. I had no idea what to expect. I've never worked with freshmen. I typically teach graduate students or at least upper level undergrads and executives. And so I didn't know if it was going to take me a year to teach them how to do a literature search, or if it would take me 2 years or 2 months. And the results have been amazing. Next slide, please. We were able to accomplish 11 completed research projects that we were able to present last Friday at the University Research Days. And you can see 2 members of the team there. And these students were absolutely unbelievably amazing. They wanted more. So I showed them how to do a literature search. They would have it completely done like a PhD student would within 2 weeks. And then they'd say, what's next? And I'm like, whoa, we better get SPSS up and running. And then they'd say, how do we run more? We want to know more than just descriptives and correlations. What else can we test in this data set? And so they learned hypothesis generation and even just creating the posters and writing abstracts. You know, they only required 100 words to submit, but they wanted to learn how to do it for the way the American Psychological Association requires an abstract. So they were on fire, and it was absolutely wonderful to see. Lily talked about intrinsic motivation, but these kids they're amazing. And to Pam's point about the structure of interdisciplinary work, I thought that the majority of students that would come towards the research because of my background would be from the School of Management. In actuality, I think it's only like 4% of our students are from the School of Management. The 2 that you saw right there were chemistry and bioengineering. And I have computer science and even art, I believe. So it's a really interesting combination of students that come together to learn about research despite the fact that they're from all different disciplines. And we've become kind of a family. So another thing that we did, next slide please, is create what we call, well, hold on just a minute, we'll go through this. This is a student's comments, and it's all happened so fast. I kept trying to stop and assess, you know, what was their experience and what were we really contributing to the university's strategy. So from a design perspective, I really wanted to make sure that we were in alignment with what we're trying to achieve strategically, and if we were getting the interdisciplinary experience for the students, as well as the ability to have a high impact learning experience. That's what we were looking for. So we also realized that we were creating a community. So it's an interesting type of a sustainable community at a much more micro level within the residential communities that we have. So you can see that Maytar here, who is an economics major, really has excelled and is going to be actually a co-author on some papers going to journals. So she has talks about the skills that she's learning through way ahead of her peers, allow her to grow intellectually. She's one of those that just keeps asking for more. So it gives her an outlet outside of the classrooms where her curiosity can grow, and really through an unbounded level. Next slide, please. There's a lot of words on this next slide. We don't need to read them all, but you can see these are other students from the DIRT team and what they have gotten from it. It's a really unique texture and fabric. I think of it more like a woven fabric of outcomes that I wasn't even expecting. So for example, if you look at Melissa Bornico, she says, being in DIRT has helped me create my own personal definition of leadership, which I thought was fascinating because she was doing a study that was coding leadership interviews, and she herself came up with a very unique angle that she presented in her poster that I had never thought of. And you know, Aisha, on the other hand, is finding it very thrilling that she gets to explore and learn more about research she wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. So she is a computer science major and is actually now going to do research in Bangladesh this summer as a freshman because she was so turned on from this DIRT experience. So some of them are planning to go, right to graduate school in this area, and others of them are planning to go to medical school, but just loved being able to learn and dig in at an unbounded, unrestricted pace. And if you look at Marilyn's, for example, her statement that it provided her with the opportunity to learn in a fast-paced, hands-on fashion that was never intimidating. So I think to Lily's point about psychological safety, I think having that space where it is, and you couldn't see, but behind where the picture was taken from, there's a table with tea and cookies on it for all of the students of the community at all time. But those kids are free to come and go all day and access me and my graduate team of 8 to get help and to keep asking questions and learning. So, she says that she was afraid it was difficult to secure a position as a research, as an undergraduate. She was scared to death to walk up to a professor and ask to be a research assistant, but we gave her a safe place. So she says that the people that I've worked with throughout my time at DIRT have been eager and willing to train me every step of the way. And I really think this one's going to end up becoming a professor, in an area. She's a psychology student. So next slide, please. So I really love that it turned out to be something that we had no idea how it was going to turn out. It could have been a big failure, could have been a big success. We had no idea. This is just a simple kind of infographic in the way in which we recruited more students. So we did this right at the January break to let students know that they could still join. You didn't have to have any kind of qualifications. We actually have students that are on academic probation in the DIRT room, which gives me a chance to say, keep track of them and actually ask them how their classes are going as well, but also is giving them that intrinsic motivation for learning that they might not otherwise be getting in their courses that got them into trouble grade-wise. So now they understand that this is what their professors are doing, and this is why they should try to do a little better in their coursework if they want to go to graduate school. Next slide, please. So it's a very interesting thing. Another thing that we had to learn, actually, if you could go back one slide, that would be great. That number is real, the 1,100 hours of research these kids did in one semester. This is what we created in January, reflecting the fall semester. That is a lot of hours for freshmen who are already totally tapped with their courses, getting their feet wet at college. They're coming towards us and sitting down and asking to do more. So I think it really sheds a whole new light on what we can do as academics in terms of inspiring. And again, back to Lily's theory and presentation about intrinsic motivation. These kids that are coming towards us want opportunities where they can keep going. And I think that we put restrictions on them and barriers on them that we don't even know that we're placing on them. So again, I just think that number that's mind-blowing to me. Every time I look at this picture, I'm like, wow. And all we had to do was keep telling them, if you're busy, that's okay. We let them even just come and sit and listen and do no work, just so they can learn about research and leave. We have, if they commit to being on a project and want to be a co-author, then they have to commit. But other than that, we essentially just ask, do you pick small, medium, or large commitment? And small can be as small as you want. If you're busy, come. If you're not, if you're too busy, it's okay. No one's going to be angry at you. But the idea is that we're just trying to encourage people to get as many undergraduates as possible to get exposed to research. Next slide, please. So I think that that part is working. What we had to also realize is that students had no idea what research was or why they should care about it. So we had to create this infographic on the left side. The greater than 100 was the number of students who just thought it sounded interesting, but we realized when they came to the first meeting, they didn't really understand why they should do it or should not, given their schedule. So we created this infographic on the left side, and we go over that with them about why they should care about research and how it can help them, get ready for references and give them something to talk about on their interviews, and how it could help them be more motivated about school in general, and how it gives them analytical skills for more critical thinking, and it helps them for graduate school if they ever think they might go. things like that. We also had to make the infographic on the right-hand side because we realized students were unaware of other opportunities across our campus. And so again, in keeping with the strategy for the multidisciplinary aspect, every student having an opportunity, we've created this from our undergraduate research office as well as another research initiative we have called the FRI Freshman Research Immersion Program. And we kind of combined everything together. And so those are dates you can't really see next to each of the circles with descriptions of what it's for and if they should apply for it. So these are all different things and activities they can do if they're interested in research across campus and getting more involved in something kind of more closely related to their discipline. So next slide is just another picture again of what we do with the posters as an outcome. Next slide, please. We also had to stop after we got going, because once the students sort of designed how it was going to really roll, and ask what's out there. Like, how does this fit strategically for the university in terms of being able to market it as to whether or not it's helping us become premier? And we realized there's only 2 other programs of research happening in a residential community in the country. And they're very different. One is at the University of Michigan, which is where the students are all living there doing research, but they're pushed out across campus doing research in different departments. So they're not necessarily on there. It's all like a research living community, but they're not actually doing multidisciplinary teams. And another is at the University of Maryland, where they have a STEM related biotech kind of research program. So we didn't even realize at first, we kind of just jumped in with a gut feeling, with Lily's inspiration and a gut feeling that we could do something new and creative. We found out we really did do something new and creative and innovative, and now we actually know that to be true. Next slide, please. Another thing that we started as part of our, as part of DIRT was what we call the research reps. And if you remember from that slide where I showed you what we created, we have a beautiful facility, a big great room with a fireplace lounge, and we host these research reps. And the idea is to translate the research that's happening on campus and make it very understandable for the students, and to also demystify research in general and researchers so that they understand our strategy here at Binghamton and what their professors are actually doing when they're not teaching, and why they should be proud to be here at Binghamton in terms of the impact that we're making on the world. So we have had 3 so far. We're having our next one next week. That picture in the far right corner is the space that we are so lucky to have, the fireplace lounge. And literally, we do it, we kind of got the kids' schedules and we figured out when a good time was. We've been doing them Friday nights at 5, and they love it. We buy them pizza and they come. But we don't only just, DIRT hosts it, but we also invite the scholars, the presidential scholars. We invite all of the kids from the Freshman Research Initiative. And we also did a poll of the entire Dickinson community, just by hand, piece of paper, every single door we knocked on, to find out what students are doing other research on campus. So we now have this giant listserv. We invite all of them. We get between 30 and 40 students at each research wrap. And we actually, again, a total accidental success, I think, happened to be doing this one the night before open house, and to the far right is actually a family that had come for open house, and that student signed to come here right after leaving this research wrap. So it really is working in ways we didn't even know it was going to work, the opportunities for us to leverage in our journey to premier. And I think something that we wanted to make sure we did, if you see, we made each of them, I have a staff member that works with each of them to come up with a kind of cool tagline about their research so we can make a cool picture so that the students aren't afraid to come. So it doesn't look too scientific and doesn't look too intimidating. So, Jessica Foy, are you living in a chemical cocktail? She studies toxic water. We had Wayne Jones, who wanted to really talk about going from being a preacher's son to being a professor, and actually his research on lighting and inorganic chemistry. And then last week we had the chair of the physics department, Bruce White, who talked about how he was working on the smart energy TAE. He talked about the TAEs to the kids. and how he captures energy. So it's a really wonderful way for the students to get, and these are just freshmen. So imagine the pride we're building, the opportunities for research they're getting. They now feel very personally connected to these faculty that we interview. Pam, we should do you next. Next slide, please. So the students really like it, and again, we're not going to read all these, but it was interesting. We didn't know what they'd get out of it, and we didn't know if they came really for the pizza, and there you'll see the pizza and the hot chocolate are good. They like that, but they really like the relaxed environment. One of the students couldn't believe I actually got Dr. White to speak, because, you know, they're freshmen and they think that these people are so famous that they might not, you know, really be able to be available. And it's just been so wonderful that they see them as friendly and human and listening, and the casual setting and the success. So I think it really humanizes research and demystifies it for the students, and is a completely accidental innovation that happened as a result of trying to design a new sort of process and system within the residential communities. So that's all that I have for my part. Any questions regarding the DIRT team or the research wraps or anything else that we're working on?
So Kim, we don't have any questions I see on the live stream right now, but one of the things that has really struck me about all the presentations today, and I'm guessing you could probably speak to this, is that we managed to get through almost an hour and a half in a program on innovation, and we didn't say anything about technology. You know, in higher education, it seems these days that, you know, technology and innovation are synonymous, and whenever you hear the term innovation in higher education, it's really a sort of code word for technology. And in hearing your example of what you're doing at Binghamton with undergraduate research, it's clear to me how innovative that is. I mean, the fact that you got those students so interested and engaged in research in an authentic way is, I'm sure there are lots of jealous folks all over the place hearing you talk about that who teach research methods classes. So I guess what I wanted to know about is, well, why do you, I mean, let me just step back a minute. Is it a mistake to just assume innovation and technology are synonymous? And how can we sort of move past that in higher education, where we just sort of reflexively think innovation, it just means, you know, adding more technology to stuff and hoping for the best?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. I absolutely think innovation does not need to be synonymous with technology, and it's a huge mistake to equate the two together. It does not mean that technology can't help us and there can't be innovations in technology, but innovation can happen anywhere. It can happen, you know, with the lid to a Coke can. It can happen to the labeling of dog food. It can happen, you know, in any of our residential halls. It can happen, you know, with cookies and hot chocolate and how you do it. And Lily's presentation had that great picture of, you know, there's innovation both in processes and output and product. So for example, I used some money to get the students hammocks in front of our residential hall last summer. And we could even call that an innovation in a process, because how many residential halls have hammocks in front for the students, and really encourage the students to study or do their homework in a hammock. I got a little pushback when I wanted to put them in the room for the winter and have them even in our room and have the students sitting in, but I think we're still going to try it. So that can be an innovation, and it doesn't require, I mean, it required the hammock stand and the hammock, but it didn't require any technology, and it didn't require, you know, a ginormous amount of money either. That doesn't mean that money can't help support it, because without, for example, a budget, I couldn't have all the graduate students and support the DIRT team, but or my cookies and the hot chocolate and tea that I keep out there for them. But I think that absolutely there is a way to be creative. Everybody, Lily's presentation, I love the rubber band analogy. We can all stretch harder. It doesn't matter what campus you're on or what area you're in charge of. There is a process or output, outcome you can affect if we can think about things differently. And Pam and I were discussing earlier before the program started about taking time to reflect. And that's something my research has looked at, is that if we actually do take time to practice being creative, we can be more creative. And so it's that question of what could we do, not should, and what might we do. And, you know, starting with just something random. I was sitting the other day in a meeting and I said, like, how would bar stools change our meeting? And what came out of it is we're actually going to, I don't know if you remember seeing that big square panel in the middle of our great room, but we're actually going to put a countertop around and some bar stools there to make standing desks for the students and put electrical outlets in for them all to charge, because that's an elevator shaft and we have electricity. So we're working on that right now. Like, that never would have happened if people thought I was just being goofy about I wish we had bar stools. But the idea is that you can innovate any place, and if we keep our students first in mind and their experience, and we constantly connect that improvement to our strategy as not only each campus, but as SUNY in general, we will really have some groundbreaking, path-breaking innovations that happen that have the world looking at SUNY for ideas and wanting to know how we get it done. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yes, it did. And again, I really liked the focus on students and really thinking carefully the integration of research and teaching. We hear a lot of lip service about that, so it was really fantastic to see that in action. And so yes, it did, and thank you very much. I did have one more question before we finish, and I'd actually like to ask Lily this question. We haven't heard from her in a while, and this is sort of the open question period. But I want to thank the both of you for your fantastic presentations, and I'll give Lily the first and now the last word. So Lily, here's a question I have about, I know leadership is crucial to innovation, and I was wondering, if we have any deans or provosts out there, what's one thing they could do to encourage their faculty to be more innovative?
I think a really important thing is just to set innovation as the goal. I think that if people know that that's valued and that that's something that's rewarded, and that we're all working towards that, and that it's meaningful for our campus, to just talk about innovation and to make sure that people know that they should be working towards innovation is really important for leaders.
Great. All right. Thank you. So thank you all for taking the time to attend today's program. Please take 2 minutes and let us know what you thought by completing the exit survey. You may access the link from the email you received momentarily if you registered in advance, or from the live stream webpage. Your feedback is useful and used to improve future Learning Tuesday programs. The next program is scheduled for May 24th and is another program for faculty interested in research leadership. It's titled What Faculty Should Know About Entrepreneurship, and we'll be joined by the author, professor, and entrepreneur Angela Mastrangelo, also from Binghamton University. And the participants will learn a 5-step model for entrepreneurial leadership, how to be entrepreneurial, and also see examples of how this is playing out at SUNY. So thanks as always for helping us spread the word about Learning Tuesday programs, and mark your calendar for next month, and we hope to see you back. Thanks again. Have a great day.
It's Kathleen. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes, thank you for the nod. Well, that wraps up that part of the session. Now, today's title was around commercial innovation and commercialization. That Learning Tuesday was primarily all innovation. I loved those professors from Binghamton. If I were back in school, I'd love to have that one in particular who seemed so student-oriented. I would just say that if you are interested in more around commercialization, then you should go ahead and check out the Research Foundation's YouTube channel. And if you put in commercialization, you'll see another video similar to this one, but it's a little bit more focused on commercialization. So again, our next session is August 19th. We start at 1 o'clock, and we hope you've enjoyed this repeat edition. And Carolyn, how about you? Do you have anything else to add?
No, this program will be recorded, so it'll be available to view on demand, and feel free to review it or share with a colleague, but it'll be posted in the workplace space in the coming days.
Any questions for anybody on the phone or on Zoom?
There's nothing in the chat.
Yeah, we've been chatting back and forth a little bit about whether somebody has moved on to New York City, but it's not that I know of. We're all still here. Okay, well then I think we'll call it a wrap here.